My name is Jeff Bertman. I'm with Dfuse Technologies most recently. Joined there a couple of months ago as CTO and lead data scientist and engineer. Before that, several years with Warner Brothers. Is there anyone from Warner Brothers here? No. Okay. Well, anyway, this is the land of Hollywood. Any other studio people? All right. Well, anyway, so today's discussion is going to focus on maximizing ROI, return on investment, which I heard in the last conversation, with big data. Right? What does big data mean? We're going to get into all that. The bottom line is we're going to focus on business value, even though there's a lot of technical content in this presentation. So let me give you a few heads-up points here. Number one, the presentation has a fair amount of glitz, Hollywood glitz. So without the Hollywood audience, I hope you guys will appreciate it from an audience perspective. Be prepared to smile. Number two, there's a decent amount of technical content. I think that the curators of Digimarcon figured, let's have at least one presentation, show the underpinnings, but without getting into the nuts and bolts. Right? Everything is going to be presented from a business value perspective. And by the way, thank you very much to the Digimarcon community for this opportunity to serve you guys. Okay, these are some of the organizations that were mentioned that my roots stem from. Verizon and AT&T and Comcast. Kobe Marketing. I have a strong background in loyalty marketing and personalization and customer profiling and things like that. So most recently, as you can see, Warner Brothers and a certain business unit called Machinima. Okay, so I've been in California for about 7 years. Prior to that, maybe prior to the last 3 years, I've been known as an uptight Easterner. So that's where this comes in. But I think I've evolved. Oh, missed that. There we go. So that's crossed out. Now, these are my various titles, CTO, blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line is, I'm a data geek. And that's what the D in Dfuse stands for, data fusion. All right. This is just a little slide to emphasize that there's a lot of Hollywood glitz in here, like we talked about. Right? So be prepared to smile, like we talked about. Now, this is where we're headed in the presentation. Okay, first, we'll be talking about the landscape of ROI and how it pertains to providing business value. Right? Everything that we discuss is going to focus on business value, not the nuts and bolts. Right? We're going to define what I like to call ROI conducive technologies. In other words, don't just pull ROI out of a box. Come prepared to the table with patterns to be able to produce consistent, reliable solutions and flex as needed to whatever changes might happen in our landscape. You know, competitive analysis, new government regulations, whatever it takes, we have to make ROI resilient, just like our processes have to be. At the very end, we'll discuss this little fairy tale wrap-up. Okay, now, this is really the only major glitz in the presentation. There are a few lovable characters. People in the technical arena know these. I present around the country with certain characters, and here they are. First one is Lopi. He's a mule. His name actually stands for lack of planning. This is Data Pigeon. He knows how to fly, but he's Lopi's friend and sometimes just sits around and doesn't really leverage his native skills. Sometimes he does. We can help him go faster than his native skills with certain tools and certain methods. But the bottom line is, without follow-through on those methods, you can still lose ROI. Right? You can plan and plan and plan, but if you don't have the right execution, then you can still have failure, which doesn't look too good. If you saw the sound version of this, there'd be an exploding noise, so just pretend. For any geeks in the audience, Successful Geeks Association also is an acronym for System Global Area. Probably most of the audience knows what System Global Area is, right? Okay, I'm just kidding. Anyway, now Lopi is transformed into a Pegasus with better skills than the pigeon as far as aviation is concerned, so enough of the animation. This slide is really here just to give you an idea of scale, right? Whenever we think of ROI, and obviously we want return on our investment, but the big challenge with big data is making sure that we can accomplish this under stress, right? Big data basically represents large volumes of data at high velocity so that we can collect all of the good stuff from all of that, clean it up, and present it and make it actionable, right? So when you're dealing with thousands, millions, and billions of whatever it is you're analyzing, the challenge is more challenging than if you just had a small amount of data. So since big data is where it's at today, the challenge of ROI is bigger than ever. So we're going to review a lot of methodologies, high-level methodologies, that'll show how to make this all happen so that everyone here can achieve their ultimate goals. And we'll get into the ultimate goals soon. Down here at the bottom, just to give you a little heads up on the technologies that we're using, Python, Amazon, Snowflake, SQL, blah, blah, blah. All right, here we're looking at the landscape. Who do the data geeks serve? Someone here mentioned they're in the technical community. I was happy to hear that. And they were also talking in context of ROI. And serving the analytics people, data science, BI, and so forth. This first pillar is who we serve directly as data engineers. If you happen to wear multiple hats, as some organizations do, on our teams, we always have a few data engineers who came from the BI and analytics realm, so they can wear multiple hats, and we can teach the other analysts and data scientists certain technologies, and of course they teach us also. But if you have people with multiple hats, you're also serving these other pillars. Finance, marketing, obviously, most of the people here, sales, operations, inventory optimization, whatever it takes. Even if we don't serve these people directly, this first pillar does. What are we doing here? We're converting data into action. What do we mean by action? This is the business value we've been talking about from the beginning. We're here to improve a company's bottom line, revenue, profit, market share, not necessarily in that order. Any other KPIs involved. How do we do that? By leveraging technology, by applying processes to all the raw and ugly stuff to make it into valuable stuff. We get stuff, do stuff, put stuff, whatever. All right, using data engineering and software engineering methods and programming languages and infrastructure and all that other good stuff. Now, here's a call out here in the middle. Ooh, I think I jumped ahead a little bit too far, but look at this middle circle here, product management. From my experience, it's more than generic best practices that are necessary in order to create business value, right? The best ROI is created by thinking of your technology, whether you are producing an end consumer product or not, as a product. So I put product management in the center here. I'll give you an example. At Machinima, the business unit of Warner Brothers, where I spent the last several years, we had processes that used to take weeks or months to expand. And ultimately, we expanded into many other areas of Warner Brothers after we were acquired in 2016. So we started doing all of the social analytics for all of Warner Brothers feature films that you go to the theater for, not just in the digital streaming arena, which was our forte. Right? We accomplished this by taking programs. When I walked in the door, I said, oh, we have all these programs. How long does it take to support a new business unit or a new platform? And the answer is weeks or months. It's like, well, what can we do to change that? We're going to discuss some of those methods as we proceed in the presentation. But the nutshell is, in this case, a lot of productization and parameterization and taking processes and making them generic so you can input data and get them out in a consistent way. So we changed those weeks and months into 2 days. That's how long it takes to add a new business unit now. And then, of course, we actualize it through visualizations and alerts and whatever else that the analysts and data scientists use to accomplish our major goal. Notice how the triangle at the top, which is supposed to be green, I don't know why it looks like yellowish here, overhangs the rest of it, because it's the only really important thing, right? It's the most important thing, improving the business value, and Jennifer was talking about that in the earlier presentation. Okay. All right, so this is a little glimpse of what's involved in making all that happen. So under the hood, we're converting data into information, which is then converted into action, like we talked about. Here's what the raw, ugly data looks like sometimes. Everyone probably recognizes this, just a little spreadsheet type data. Does anyone recognize this to the left here? Just any movie that people have seen? There you go, The Matrix, right? Happens to be Warner Brothers. There are other good companies out there, but this happens to be Warner Brothers, right? What do we convert it into? The visualizations, the alerts, downstream data feeds, whatever it takes to be holistic and provide value across the organization. These are just some examples where we get data, Google, YouTube, Twitter, Amazon, Pluto TV, you name it. Finance systems, Salesforce, sensors. Okay, sometimes we get a lot of data from sensors and IoT, Internet of Things environments. And this is what we're providing value to consumers. These are the pillars that we talked about before, BI and sales and so forth, and finance, even security and compliance. All right, this is a landscape of the methodologies that we use to make all this stuff happen. We're not going to go through all these little boxes, right? But I want to point out some things. Here on the left, we start out kind of gray and undefined, and over here on the right, we're producing a product, the productization that we talked about before. It's not just a project where we're producing results, which is good. We're producing a product which is much better than good. Call it at least excellent. So in the middle here, if you look closely, maybe it's not on this viewer, but if you look at the slides on your computer, you'll see a texture here. And that's what we're doing throughout the life cycle, is we're adding color and texture, by exercising these certain practices. And that's really what it's about. If you do this well, then you're going to have ingredients to improve your ROI, return on investment again. All right, now let's define ROI in the context of big data and the business values that we're focusing on. First, we're basically leveraging technology to produce financial gain of some kind. That's why this, the I is investment oriented, right? We're investing in something. So that's where the spend comes from. We're leveraging technology to gain money of some kind, not just the immediate results, but whatever the ripples are in the business environment. Customer loyalty, for example, can't necessarily be measured instantly. You have to measure it over time. And we have to gather that data over time and prove that we're making the value that we think we are. Let's see. So down here at the bottom, we can see our goals in order to accomplish all of the above are broken into availability, which is making sure that our systems are up and running. Right? That's the classic IT thing, right? If something's broken, everyone hears about it. If nothing's broken, everyone takes it for granted. But it's true. Making things maintainable, reliable, functional, compliant with the security constraints, and so we don't have any distractions. Sometimes we might produce a solution that's just spot on as far as business functionality, but if it doesn't adhere to whatever security compliance is required, then it'll be shut down. There'll be some kind of distraction and noise from accomplishing what we really need, and that's still part of the ROI picture. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind when you're looking at ROI, it's never just about the cost of whatever your main focus is. It's about the whole picture. And there are numerous ways where you can spend or save money in one area, but lose money somewhere else because there's cause and effect, there's dependencies in your technical environment and all this other stuff. And to a large degree, the same holds true for business. That's why we have marketing simulations. And that's why the most accurate simulations are going to look at the whole landscape, not just exactly what you're focusing on. All right, so there's a couple of examples here that I can get into. The second one here could be relevant to an audience. You know, people who, any cord cutters in this audience? Does cord cutting ring a bell? People who've given up their cable television or their satellite and now focus exclusively on Hulu or Pluto TV or Sling or anything like that? Raise your hand. No? Wow, okay, all right, maybe about 30%. So let me give you an example that more people can relate to. Tim Hawkins, in my opinion, a famous family-friendly comedian. You can look him up on YouTube, and he also tours the country. Anyway, he has a very simple joke about how much kids cost, right? He says, oh, I went out and spent $5 on a slip and slide, thinking that this is going to be a cheap way to entertain the kids. And then I got the $400 water bill. Okay, so that's the bottom line. Same thing happens with technology, as we're going to see in subsequent slides. Cord cutting is one way that if you're not careful, you can do the same thing, right? Say, hey, I'm going to get rid of my $150 cable bill and all my set-top boxes throughout the house. I'm going to get, but then you still have to buy televisions that have the appliance built in, or a Roku, or a Fire Stick, or whatever. And then before you know it, you're all using things and streaming them at the same time. So you have to make sure that your internet connection is bigger than it was before. So you're spending more money on that. And then, everything I want isn't on Hulu. So I also have to get Netflix and Amazon Prime and whatever else. So you have to look at the whole picture. With ROI, the same is absolutely true in technology. I'm not going to touch this top box here for this audience. That's AWS Lambda and other fun stuff. Okay, so eventually we're going to get into a little term. I'm going to introduce a little term called polyglot. All right, now this slide I think I threw in at about 3 a.m. Why it's in the middle of the deck, I have no idea. But presumably we've already covered exactly what the abstract of this presentation is, so I'm going to skim past it. And as we proceed, I'm going to skim past some of the other slides, basically showing or concentrating on the context of the slides without the content. That's what I mean by not getting into the nuts and bolts, but giving the business value picture. Okay. We talked before about ROI conducive technologies, all right? Creating an infrastructure with patterns so that when the business people come to us, we have 20 things in our toolbox that we can quickly respond with and maybe customize some of them. So that's what I mean by ROI conducive technologies. And above and beyond having a preset toolbox with a productization mindset, we also want to provide shortcuts when necessary. Everyone wants stuff faster than it ever was produced before. So here's some examples of how that happens. This diagram shows a traditional data flow, right, from all your sources, whether it's social media or your accounting systems and sales, CRM, et cetera, flowing through your typical monolithic process. The big arrows show this monolithic flow into your data lake, and then you're transforming it into your data hub or your presentation layer, and then you're ultimately getting it here. How many people love waiting for all that to happen? Okay, excellent. No hands. I don't like it myself. So these purple lines here, the dotted lines, represent all the shortcuts that you can take. And if you're good at this, that becomes part of your toolbox, right? Getting the information sooner versus later. So I can go right from my data lake, to the presentation layer, or even to the end users directly. There are a lot of tools and technologies out there to make that happen. There's a whole realm of not just data science, but citizen data science. Is there anyone in the audience familiar with the term citizen data science? Everyone probably knows about data science, right? So citizen data science is a way of taking conventional analytics and analysts who've been producing business value results for years. They don't necessarily know all the algorithms inside and out, but there are certain tools like Alteryx, for example, ALTERYX, and we've started partnering with this company because they have a solution to get to empower conventional analysts to the level of reasonable data science sooner versus later. And even formal data scientists can use the tool to do the command line Python, or R, or whatever they want. So it's kind of a universal tool. There are more tools like that emerging over time. Aside of the tools, there are a lot of methods to make all this stuff, all these shortcuts happen too. Now the rest of this we're going to skim through. Bottom line is we're producing actionable insights. And I did use the term Uber here just because it is a generic word. It's not just associated with a multi-billion-dollar company. The rest of this stuff that's filling in here is just to note, in our environments, in our toolbox, we have custom ways of doing things like hand coding with Python, or whatever it takes, and then this turbo method where we're going to use certain special libraries or tools like Datorama, Illuma, Boomi, whatever, where you can spend money and get faster results, presumably, but you have to look at the ROI. And in the future slides, we're going to see what that really means. Okay, so this is the birth of something I call the fitness technology landscape. And I'm not going to get into the details there, but you can see I was at the movie theater. My family was actually having fun viewing a movie. I was in the little cafe area, and this demonstrates what other people do while geeks write papers and presentations. But more importantly, while we do things that can be leveraged in meaningful business ways. All right, so this is a slide that's going to show us what we talked about. You save money here, but you can lose money there, right? Let me walk through a few things. This just happens to list certain technologies. Snowflake is on here, one of my absolute favorites. And you can see where the columns at the top here, product, compute, storage, input, output, there are charges that we incur in environments, especially in cloud environments, where these different areas of spending money occur. So when we choose a product that is saving us money in one space, like Snowflake, for example, works on Amazon AWS S3 storage, whatever that means, right? It happens to be a big cost savings. The product actually costs a little bit more than Redshift, which comes from Amazon directly. But the net savings is the same or arguably a little bit better, right? Technology like Snowflake early in 2017 was almost non-existent. Here we are in mid-2019, and they are the most common buzzword in all big data platforms for refined data hubs, right? I sat across the table from Bob Mugley at one of those VIP events. He was the CEO of Snowflake early in 2017, and I said, "You're going to be the next Larry Ellison." And he looked at me like I was crazy. And a year later, they were selling 30 new accounts every single month. And now they're a common word, at least across the data engineering realm. So that's the takeaway here, is you have to look across the layers and see, just because a product costs more, the ROI is actually going to come out better. All right, so this is basically a reality check, right? The homogeneous versus heterogeneous environments. In the past, we used to depend on a smaller set of big products that did everything for us. Oracle, in the data space, Oracle, IBM, with DB2, and Microsoft with SQL Server. Those are basically the three pillars. I used to write competitive analysis articles, and one of them was called Big Red versus Big Blue, Oracle versus DB2. They circulated that out in Redwood Shores and flew me out there to talk about how to plan for the future, right? The bottom line is now the future is not with enterprise products that try to do everything. They're with products that have best of breed approaches. And let's see, how long do we have until? Thank you, I appreciate that. Anyway, so the idea of having a homogeneous environment where you just have a few tools is pretty much over. Now there are so many tools out there, many of which you can get for free, that do what you need in the world of the data platform and in the world of the tools that go along with it. So we're going to examine, in order to maximize ROI, how unfortunately, in a way, you have to use more tools than you used to in the past, but if you integrate everything well, which is easy to do, you can accomplish the ROI that you need. Okay, this is the term that we threw out a little bit earlier, polyglot. Right? This is a more formal definition. In the 1800s, people used to use this term to represent a person who spoke multiple languages. Today, even though it died in popularity for a long time, this term has reemerged. And now, since 2012, it's come to mean something in the technical world. Basically, in the programming environment, I'm not just going to use one language, I'm going to use multiple languages. My data science people are going to use R and Python probably. In my web environment, I'm going to use Java, JavaScript, Node.js, Angular, a variety of frameworks to make it all happen. Ruby. Polyglot persistence is the same principle applied to the data platforms that we just discussed. In other words, instead of just Oracle or DB2 or SQL Server, now we're talking about Snowflake or Redshift or Greenplum Pivotal or whatever it takes. Okay, this is basically just the idea. It's a principle called technical polyglot propensity. I just call it TP3. And it means that if you're trying to do too much, you'll probably fall behind the technology curve and be leapfrogged by competitors, just like Snowflake has leapfrogged the biggest players, Oracle, and I'm not going to say Microsoft at this point because Microsoft has done a pretty good job of keeping up, and Oracle can leapfrog again. So no one is a loser in these worlds. There's always leapfrogging. One of the big things about ROI is that you can't just jump into a new technology because it's better. You have to look and see what is the ecosystem, what is the vendor viability, what is interoperability with other things in your environment. How is that going to change over time? And don't jump because you'll find yourself jumping too often, and that can be expensive by itself. Right? All right. Now let's examine a few of the toolboxes that we were talking about before, some toolbox patterns. Right? One environment is, let's say our goal here is to support information that is not going to be available long term. When I get data from Twitch, for example, is anyone familiar with Twitch? It's a gaming platform, a lot of videos and things. Right? If I want to analyze the live feeds from Twitch, I have one opportunity. If 1 second passes, I can never get the data again. That's unlike analyzing data from other places like YouTube or even Twitch videos. If it's not a live feed, I can go back and get the data tomorrow or the next day or whatever. But there are many things, especially in the sensor world of IoT that we talked a little bit about before, where you can't go back and get data again. So you have to come up with architectures that get the data in a reliable, available, high availability environment to get the data, store it, and then I can do whatever I want, whenever I want. All right? This pattern happens to satisfy those requirements, and it's appropriate for Twitch live streams, Facebook Core, Instagram, and for other platforms, You don't necessarily have to use it, but you still can. We're getting the data as soon as possible, putting it in a data lake, and then whenever we need it, we're rendering it for analytics. And those analytics could be near real time, or they could be daily even. Here's another pattern where we get the data and we don't necessarily need the data right away, but we can take our time. In other words, sometimes there's a lower level of effort involved in producing one architecture versus another, and why over-engineer something that doesn't need to be over-engineered? Get it out the door quickly, and set the stage to evolve that architecture into another architecture so you can do it later without incurring technical debt, right? And that's a big topic. Technical debt is like, oh, I can cut corners, but then later on, my environment starts slowing down. I fix one thing, I break another. I implement the new feature and everyone's happy, but it broke this other stuff. All right, so having these technical patterns isn't just the toolbox, it's having them set up in advance so that you can toggle between patterns if you need to. This is more of a technical slide about libraries that we can do in Python to get the job done by the command line. This is something to wake you guys up because we only have 4 minutes left. I'm going to breeze through these next slides, but they're here to represent the idea that there's a tendency today to do things in the command line, which is very admirable and effective for many purposes. At the same time, you can use open source tools to do things visually. In the world of data science, for example, you have KNIME, which is, and we talked about Alteryx also. KNIME happens to be open source and free. So some of these tools, in this particular case, Pentaho, PDI, allow us to get things done in a reproducible way so that when it's finished, I have one programmer who knows how to do it, but any other programmer can pick up the job. Instead of, oh, it's going to take me a while to understand this guy's code. Well, with a visual tool like this, ROI is a little bit better. But in our patterns that we discussed before, we use these tools in a hybrid fashion. For example, we used Python for extraction, but might use something like Pentaho in order to do heavy-duty transformations. Those are the types of patterns that result in high complexity and that might not be transferable from one developer to another. So we want to make everything maintainable, as we said was one of our original goals of ROI. And I'm not going to dig into the examples here. Big data, they come out of the box with a lot of different tool sets and support for different platforms. Okay, the next couple of slides focus on different ROI impact areas. How do we save, time? And if we're going to cut corners, how do we not pay for cutting those corners later? Right? I don't think we're going to have time. It's going to take me about 7 minutes to go through these 3 slides. Am I correct? No time. All right. So I'm getting a no. Let me just call out a couple of things here. This one here in the middle, right? Let's say that I have a deliverable, and I just want to get it out the door, and I have a lot of proud people involved. And a good data engineer isn't going to want to produce something that they're ashamed of. That's your A-team, right? Furthermore, you have a deadline, so you have to preach the idea of excellence, not perfection, right? And you also want to prevent spaghetti from building up that you're going to pay a lot for later. How do you do all that? Twitter. Okay, the Twitter hashtag is your friend. So this is just one of many methods that improve the ROI in your environment. If you know you're going to do something that is slow, you just tag your code. You teach your team to tag their code, or a document for that matter. It doesn't have to be a program, with hashtag performance. We just call it hashtag perf. Later on, you know that the system is going to slow down. In 6 months, it's going to start really slow. So things are going to slow down. But we have 6 months until we have to worry about that. So instead of just saying, okay, we're going to take the shortcut, and then 6 months later we'll all be surprised, oh yeah, what happened? Everything is slow. We forgot about that. We just tagged the code. And now, instead of getting an expensive, high-cost, advanced person to go in there and holistically look at all the performance bottlenecks from the beginning to the end and being a hero, which sounds good, let's make it better than that. We can take a junior person and say, hey, look at all the tags, all the perf ones in these particular modules, and do them. We tracked our dirt as we were making it happen, all right? So we prevented the technical debt from growing. That's one of the biggest methods of saving ROI in the technical environment. We're not going to have time to go into the other cases, but I think I have time for the fairy tale ending. This is a book I was reading with my daughter, and people might recognize Dora the Explorer. It looks like a really happy environment, you know, everyone's smiling and whatever, but is it really totally happy? If you look close enough, you can see this little imperfection in the back, and I was kind of stunned when I was reading it, thinking, why? Why would they put that in there? My feeling is that they put it in there specifically so I can put this in my presentation. But in reality, it's the epitome of every environment. It doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be consistently excellent, and it's not going to degrade. In order to achieve ROI, you have to make sure you can tolerate situations like this. Then, excellence, not necessarily perfection, is the way to make everyone happy and increase your ROI. That's the fairy tale ending. These are the appropriate credits to the illustrator. And by the way, it happens to be manufactured in China. Okay, do we have time for any Q&A?
Yeah, let's get one.
Okay, let's get one. We had a technical person there that might have some questions. The rest of the people, I don't know.
It's always a difficult time for questions.
There's a person in the back there.
Hey, I have a quick question.
Sure.
Forgive me if this is a stupid question, but curious for someone who has like a small or like a mid-sized business and they're not really sure where to start with how to like deal with their data. I mean, they have all this data everywhere, and I think you kind of skirted through some of the platforms, Python and other things, but is there an actual platform that you recommend to kind of get started with managing it so that a data engineer can begin to use it? I'm just not sure if there's actually anything other than Python because it has a really high learning curve. So I'm just curious for someone who's not familiar with it, is there something that we can use, a platform?
Okay. So are we talking about data integration, data engineering, data analytics?
I'm referring to the slide that you put up where I think you had a few pillars and it showed how analytics can help like the accounting or the marketing teams.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get that information from that one pillar to, or maybe reverse, how can the person that's collecting information prepare that for that first pillar you showed earlier?
Okay. It's sounding a little distorted to me here, but this is the gist of it, I believe, your question. Is are there any recommendations for tools? Do you have to start with something like Python? And the answer is no. Right? Whenever you're choosing tools and whenever you're examining the landscape of ROI, you have to project that over your talent pool, right? So if your existing staff doesn't or isn't prepared to deal with command line, to make things happen, then you gear your ROI and investments towards something that is more relevant for them. And at the same time, maybe start an educational program, so that you have that option available. But there are a variety of tools to avoid the whole command line thing altogether. Like on the bottom left of one of those slides, you might have seen Illuma. There's Dell Boomi. Illuma, by the way, was bought by Google a few months ago. Datorama, and Datorama is an end-to-end tool. It was bought by Salesforce last year, along with MuleSoft, which allows you to collect data, massage it into whatever you need, and in the case of Datorama, visualize it just like you would in Tableau. As a matter of fact, they consider themselves a competitor of Tableau, even though most people think of them as a data integration tool. So those are drag and drop tools to get the job done with minimal, with what's called low-code / no-code approach, where you don't have to, do the Python. At the same time, many of them will allow you to enhance their functionality by using Python. And in the world of data, sooner or later, at least over the next 5 years, in my opinion, it's a healthy thing to get involved in Python. The beauty of Python is that your engineers can use it, and you can also use it for analytics and data science. It's one universal language that speaks data. You might see things about Scala and some other languages too. There are certain niches for performance where those can come in handy, but Python is more universal.
Good question. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Okay.
We appreciate you.
All right, thank you.